Hey guys, welcome to Warhammer stuff. So today we have the Dark Angels versus Nurgle Deamons. So let's go ahead and check out the armies.
And like the video if you like the video, comment if you want to comment, share it if you want to share it, and subscribe for more battles to come. Alright, for today's game we have 1-1, recover the relics. This is a hold 1, hold 2, hold more. The mission objective is just kill more enemy units. You get 1 victory point per turn, up to 3 for every enemy unit killed. And that is the mission. Alright, so for secondaries, we're going Reality Rebels for Demons, which is just control terrain and area in the center, and grind them down. My guys are pretty tough. He has very few units, but so do I, so I figure this might have a good chance. And then Despoilers of Reality, which is basically an action if one of my infantry units does it on an objective. I start at the end of the movement phase. It completes in my next command phase. If it's done, I get 4 points, and I will gain on a 6-up, I will gain add 1 to the result if it's an icon or instrument on it, and I gain a Warp Storm point. So pretty useful, and that's essentially what the demons are taking.
Yeah, so for me, I'm playing the Dark Angels, obviously. So they only have 1 secondary at this point in the game. They took out 2 or 3 of the however many they had originally. So I took the only one they do have, which is Stubborn Defiance, which is basically I find an objective that's not in my deployment zone, and then I sit on it. And I get points the longer I sit on it. So we'll see how easy that is. Then I have Raise the Banners High. I have some speedy units, but I also have a lot of troops that, you know, they can touch an objective, do this thing, and then they can roll on, and I'll still be able to hold on to the objective. And so we'll see how that goes for me. And then Engage on All Fronts. I have a lot of speedy units, so I figured, you know, that might do it for me. So we'll see. It's actually been a while since I've had to pick generic secondaries, because usually I just have all of the armies, so we'll see.
Alright, so for deployment, first Nurgle lost the roll off. My opponent made me play first. So first, I'm placing, thanks to Arcs of Omen, fortifications, Feculent Narmals. Now you may notice these fortifications are in cover in no man's land, so they have a rule. They are fortifications, which means they can't control points and they can't do actions, but they still count as my units. So this one's going to be earning me a point a turn in being 6 inches in the center of the board. But essentially they have a rule that they can be placed anywhere on the battlefield that's more than 9 inches away from enemy, including onto terrain and stuff, so they're treated sort of as a unit in that way. So these guys went up first. I took the center. Then I took this spot here. If he tries to charge it, this terrain's going to slow him down. This one, it's really hard to find a good spot for this one, the terrain. These also function as warp locuses, so I can deep strike within 6 inches there. Within 6 inches of him and within 6 inches of an enemy. Or 6 inches away from an enemy. And so, apart from that, once that happened, I then just started putting all my guys in the line. Plague Bearers, all in the line. Plague Drones, giving them reinforcement in the back. They're in the center, so they can go anywhere. They have a 10-inch move, which is slow for my fast units, quote-unquote fast units. And then Nurglings, I didn't really need them to go forward, so I have 1 squad on the back on touching here, and 1 on here, because he has the new Desolator squad, and so he can shoot me from a distance. And so these Nurglings are beyond the distance he currently is right now. He placed them down, so I countered with this. These Nurglings are there just in case, so I'll hold this back objective for a bit. And yeah, and that's pretty much it. Just filling the line. The Nurgle army plays a very specific, certain way. The rest of my army is in Deep Strike, which I'll go over soon. So essentially, I have a huge battle line to take this half of the board and do not much else. As far as Deep Striking, so 2 Great Unclean Ones, 2 units of Beasts of Nurgle. These Beasts of Nurgle essentially function as bodyguards. Pretty strong units, very strong and dangerous, apart from their crappy weapon skill. Now, as far as my Warlord, Great Unclean One, he has Smite, Nurgle's Rot, Stream of Corruption. These are offensive spells. Apart from that, he has Bile Sword and Plague Flail. Now, he has apart from the Demonic Lord Order, he has Revolting Resilient. He has Damage Reduction 1. He has Corruption, which I take a melee weapon, add 1 to its damage, and it ignores Feel No Pains. And that's going to be on his Bile Sword. Virulent Touch. Every time he makes a melee attack, if it hits, it automatically wounds. That's totally going away in the new in 10th edition. I can just feel it. Then I have the second Great Unclean one. This is more of a support one, with a Bile Sword and Plague Flail. However, he has Virulent Blessing, which is a buff, which is add 1 damage to Plague Bearer or Nurgle Core units. Shriveling Pox, which reduces enemy toughness. Then I have he has a relic called the Effluvior, which replaces his Plague Flail. Essentially, what it is 3d3 shots, AP minus 3, damage 3. But these shots, the damage carries over, so it'll spill over into multiple enemies. So that's really good for killing a lot. He has the Hideous Visage aura, which is subtract 1 from leadership characteristics of enemies within 6 inches, and subtract 1 from combat attrition. So if anyone is near him and they need to take a combat attrition, they're doing it at 1, 2, 3, they run. If my opponent was not Space Marine, though. But they have really low leadership next to him. And yeah, and that is my, I believe, 1995 points of Nurgle Deamons with 3 CP.
Alright, you guys, so for my deployment, I've never played Dark Angels before, so I'm kind of excited. They have a weird amount of unique rules, just because they're Dark Angels, I guess. So I have a couple of speedy units, so I kept them farther back and behind buildings. Of course, I realized he also doesn't have any shooting, so I didn't actually really need to do that in hindsight. But anyway, and then so I kept my other units kind of farther forward. So like my Devastators, my Tacticals, still hidden because it was a little bit in that I realized he didn't have shooting. But anyway, my Infiltrators are sitting on an objective already to do
Stubborn Defiance.
my mission secondary or my army secondary. We'll see how that goes. But basically, I was gonna hide and then just run out and murder stuff. And so relatively simple. My Desolation Marines they're the new boys. They're just gonna camp out on the back objective. They don't really need to, but they are. Because they could technically move around, because they can shoot without having to see stuff, and they have really long range, so it doesn't really matter where they are on the board, I believe. I could be wrong. So rapid response, a nice mix, and a lot of plasma guns, because Dark Angels and plasma go together like stuff that goes together. Anyway, I also have the Brutalis Dreadnought. I wanted to try him out. I thought he was kind of cool sounding, so we'll see if he is worth the 175 points, I think. This is a Redemptor model. I know it's a Redemptor-sized Dreadnought, but obviously the model has not come out to TTS because no one's designed it yet. So it's just a Redemptor, but it is Brutalis. And then I have Lazarus as a HQ. He is essentially a named captain with a bubble for a Feel No Pain, I do believe. And so that's pretty cool. And then over in my Deep Strike, or I think it's still Deep Strike, right? Teleport Strike, sorry. Is where the real heavy hitting is. I have one full squad of Deathwing Knights. And obviously they all have the Mace of Absolution and the Storm Shields. Then I have a Deathwing Apothecary, and then I have a Deathwing Strike Master. Didn't even know this guy existed. But he essentially functions as a lieutenant from what I understand. But anyway, so he is my Warlord, because obviously a named character can't pick different traits. So this guy's my Warlord. He has the Calibanite Warlord trait, which basically means he wounds on 2s against infantry and bikers. And he also has the Shroud of Heroes relic, which means he's -1 to hit, because my lieutenants historically die very quickly. And so these guys are inner circle. I do have some Black Knights as well. I don't really know necessarily what they do. It looks like they have a bunch of speedy plasma guns, and I gave them hammers. So what I tried to do with the Dark Angels, because they have a lot of unique units, is try and mix really heavy-hitting slow units with really hard-hitting fast units, and then a mix of infantry to kind of deal with objectives and secondaries and stuff. in the meantime. And so we'll see if my plan works. There's a lot of rules to remember for the Dark Angels. I was not expecting that. So yeah, that's my plan. That's my idea. We'll see what happens.
All right. Who goes first? Who goes second? I believe you went first, or you talked about it first last time, so I will go first on this discussion. So, the way I play as Nurgle is very cagey, and I focus on the objectives, because, unfortunately, that's kind of how they are played. Essentially, if I go first, I'm going to start getting a lot of my objectives done. 3 objectives are right here. I'll start the ritual ones and probably get like 12 points in the first whole turn. Well, unless he interrupts me. Some easy points there, and prepare for his counter push. That's pretty much it. If I go second, the plan is the same, but I might have some issues protecting my stuff. Dealing with his infiltrators here, I mean, killing them, wiping them out is a big, important thing for me because of the objective issue. So if I can stop this thing from happening, if I can take this from them, I can take this objective, then I will probably have a good shoe-in for victory, because that's a good chunk of his points. Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm going to do. If I go first or second, it's the same thing. The only thing is, if I go first, I have a better chance of completing my secondaries. If I go second, it'll be harder with all your Raven Wing. So that's what I think. What about you?
Well, the thing is, you're a pretty slow-moving army. So that isn't too big of a factor, because honestly, those objectives, whatever you're going to do, is going to happen anyway, because I have fast-moving units, but not enough to get there and then kill you off of stuff to prevent secondary, so that doesn't matter. Me going first, however, does mean I have 2 turns before your deep strikes have a chance to come in. So that's kind of a bigger factor. So I think for that sense, I probably want to go first, because then that means that my deep strikes would come in after yours. And so in that sense, I think that's kind of important. But other than that, I think that's really the only factor that I can think of that's important here. So yeah, I would say I want to go first. I think that's the move for me.
All right. I think I want to go first because it'll be easier to secure the secondary. So, all right then.
All right, we both want to go first. Let's see what happens.
I got a cocked.
I got a 1.
I got a 2. I go first.
Looks like you're going first. Not by much.
Not by much, yeah. But all right, so Nurgle, turn 1. All right, so for movement phase, there's no command phase. So for movement, basically, Plague Bearers moved on to the point. They started doing the secondary objective. I can't remember if it was Reality Rebels or something like that. Nurglings in the back did it as well. And then the rest of the Plague Bearers ran forward to get into positions. The Yellow Squad was able to run pretty far forward. I wasn't too worried about reprisals because his super fast units are, well, they're bikers and they have to go around a lot of the terrain, so they're actually a lot farther than they look. And essentially, yeah, that works for me. And apart from that, the Plague Drones ran out to try to do some stuff. Basically to be in a position where they can rapidly react to any enemy movement. And that's pretty much the entirety of my movement phase. Alright, so for the shooting phase, my blue unit of Plague Drones fired at his pink infiltrators, and essentially what happened was a couple shots hit, 2 wounds, and he made all the saves. And that was it for the shooting phase. Alright, so for points, I got nothing. I got no grind them down, but I did get the spoilers of reality. No, not the spoilers. Reality Rebels, yes. So I have 2 table quarters that have more demonic units than he does, and I have the center. So that's 3 points. So it is a start to Spoilers of Reality. We'll see how that goes. And yeah. We'll see how the game goes.
All right, you guys. So for movement and command phase, technically, I had no command phase. So, movement phase. My orange Devastators basically moved a little farther into the little island that they were in. Just a better spot for them. Then the blue tacticals ran onto this objective over here. Then the Ravenwing Black Knights also ran, and because they can turbo boost and it's Devastator Doctrine, they moved static 23 inches, which is super cool. And so they were able to get actually pretty far up the board. Well, I say pretty far up. It's actually, geographically, it's not that far. But it was 23 inches of movement, which is a lot. Then the green Landspeeder Vengeance popped out as well, because he has a 12-inch move, so he just kind of got a little bit closer. The Desolation Marines stayed because they're sitting on the objective, and they can shoot without having to see stuff, so it didn't honestly matter what they do. Then the Infiltrators, they stayed, and they started the not mission secondary, they started Raise the Banners, as did the Desolation Marines. Then my Brutalis Dreadnought ran, and he poked out just to the side of them, and Lazarus poked out just next to the Infiltrators as well. And then the red Landspeeder Vengeance popped out just on the bottom corner there to do some fire support as well. Yeah, that was my movement phase. All right, you guys. So for shooting, a little bit happened, not really a lot happened. The Black Knight shot at his tree, doing 1 damage because they have assault plasma guns, but only 1 went through because it has a 3-up invuln or demon save. Then my green Landspeeder Vengeance shot at his yellow Plague Bearers, and 2 of them died and 1 took a wound, but that was also in coordination with the Devastator Plasma Marines. So between the 2 of them, they chipped away at it. Then the Desolation Marines shot, and they used their Castellan launchers on his blue Plague drones, doing no damage.
I saved them.
But then,
I saved them, that's why.
Oh, yeah, so I think like 2 or 3 got through, but then he saved them. Then they shot their super crack missiles, I think that's what they called it, at the tree. Only 1 went through because it has a 3-up invuln again, but it did 4 damage because it's D3 plus 3. And so that one took a bit of a hit, but not like a lot of a hit. And then the Ravenwing Landspeeder Vengeance, the red one at the bottom, also shot at them, and he actually did 2 damage with his assault cannon, I think.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So a little bit of chip damage, honestly, not as much as I was hoping for. But as the game gets going, we'll see how it all really works out. So that was my shooting phase.
And to point out that the Desolation Marines used a 2-point stratagem to be able to shoot and do their action. So just
that's right, uncompromising fire out of the Space Marine Codex.
Yeah, one of the few stratagems we can remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
All right, you guys. So for points, obviously no primaries because it's the first turn. Secondary, mission secondary, no points because I didn't actually wipe any units out. I gave it a go, but it did not work out. Stubborn Defiance, because it's the first turn, I got 1 point. As they survive, it'll grow from there. Raise the Banners high. 2 of the actions were completed, but I technically don't get the points until my next command phase. So I just set a marker next to it so that way I would just remember. And then my turn, I'll add points in. And then Engage in all fronts. I'm only on
2.
1 half of the table, so I need to move into 1 more quarter. To do that, to start getting points there. So yeah, so super minor turn for points, but maybe positioning wise it was okay. And yeah, so we'll see how we go.
Alright, so for the movement phase, overall, a few things happened again. Alright, so, in the command phase, first, so the trees actually can heal Plague Bearers, can bring them back. So I roll 7 dice, and every 6 is a body back. I rolled none of them, and I can attempt this. Each tree can only target, Plague Bearers can only be targeted once for this, and only one of my Plague Bearer units lost anyone, so. Well, anyway, so Then essentially what happened next is my yellow squad Plague Bears, I eventually ran them. They rolled poorly, so I spent a CP to re-roll that. And they moved on to a point. Oh, shoot, I forgot. There's a lot of points happening at the beginning. So essentially all my actions on the points finished. And so 2 of my points were done by Plague Bears, which have an icon. And so basically, once this secondary is done, I roll a dice. On a 6, I get another Warp Storm point. And so with the icon, it becomes a 5-up. And so I rolled 2 dice, and 5 and a 6, so I got 2 more Warp Storm points. And then my Nurgling Swarm rolled, and they got a 5, wasn't a 6, because they don't have an icon. But I completed 3 secondary objectives right there, and I got 2 extra Warp Storm points, bringing me to 5, which I spent 3 of them. I was supposed to spend it earlier in the command phase, but forgot. So basically, I did one that would spend to make it -1 to leadership, and so. So basically, if he's within 6 inches of any of my guys, he now has -2 to his leadership, which is going to be very important for deep striking. And essentially what happens is all my units move up. Pink squad moves up to block the back area. Orange Nurglings move south to create a no deep strike one. My teal Nurgling squads move in such a way so that if he deep strikes behind them, he has to go through this area terrain, which will screw him over entirely. Orange Plague Bearers run forward, they ran forward to get in a position for baiting or something. My Plague Drones moved up to the purple ones to engage the orange Devastator Marines in there. They have fly. And the blue Plague Drones move to deal with the infiltrators that he has there. And then once all that was done, then began the very long process of finding a good spot to deep strike it. So since he was at -2 to leadership, I was able, his Blackwing Knights have leadership 8, they're sergeant. And so that basically just, I was able to deep strike in within 6 inches of him. So Great and Clean One landed up top. I did a pre-check in the game, and yes, he can go through there if he goes in a straight line. And his bodyguard, Beast of Nurgle, is right next to him. I'm making them his bodyguard. Then the green Great and Clean One moved in, but we forgot those were infiltrators. And so he basically has to be far away, so he can't deep strike very close, so he's very far. And his Beasts of Nurgles are up top. They're in a position where they could do stuff, but we'll see what happens. And that was the movement phase. Alright, so for the psychic phase, up top, my Warlord casts, Nurgle's Rot, needs a 7, it fails. And he uses Stream of Corruption on a 6, it passes on a 10. And it hits the nearest enemy unit, 12-inch range, and it does D3 mortal wounds. Does a D3 plus 2 if it's 11 or more models. And so I ended up doing 3 mortal wounds to the Ravenwing Black Knights, killing one. Then, and at the bottom, my green Great Unclean One cast a buff of Virulent Blessing onto the Plague Drones, which basically needs a 6 to go off, 18-inch range. It adds +1 to the damage to their Plague Swords. Then I cast Shriveling Pox on his Infiltrators, needs a 6, it reduces their toughness by 1, it did not go off. And that was my psychic phase. Alright, shooting phase. So first, the Plague Drones on the bottom shot at his Infiltrators. 1 wound went through, but he ignored it because Helix Gauntlet. Up top, purple ones fired at his orange Devastators. Nothing happened. He saved it. Or no, it failed to wound. Then Warlord Great Unclean One fired his Putrid Vomit on them, and did 3 wounds went through, and he failed too, so 2 damage went through. And then when his Plague Flail went, rolled Abysmal, and kept rolling Abysmal. Needed 3s to hit and 3s to wound. Absolutely failed. And that was my shooting phase. Alright, so for the charge phase, first, blue Plague Drones on the bottom charge his Infiltrators, make it in. Position so that he can't heroically intervene with Lazarus. Then my red Great Unclean One charges his Ravenwing Black Knights, and he fails it. I spend a CP to re-roll. He makes it in just barely. And that's it for the shooting or charge phase. And the purple Plague Drones charge his orange Devastators. Alright, so for the fight phase, first my Warlord goes first, and he uses sweep attacks. So he has 12 attacks, and all of them hit. And because of his relics and Warlord trait, they automatically wound, and because of his relic, the damage 1 on his sweep turns to damage 2. So he has 12 attacks at -3 2 damage, and wipes out a giant chunk of his knights. And then my Nurglings within him swing, and they actually end up doing 3 wounds. And then apart from that, then my purple squad, he chooses not to interrupt, so my purple squad of Plague Drones swing, they kill 1 guy of the orange Devastators. Then my blue Plague Drones swing on his infiltrators and kill 2 of them. That was absolutely terrible. And then he swung back and he finished off one of my Plague Drones, did a wound on the blue squad. The orange Devastator squad did 3 wounds to my purple Plague Drones. And then the Ravenwing Black Knight successfully did 1 wound to my Great Unclean One. And that was the fight phase. Alright, so for the leadership or morale phase, the purple infiltrators on the bottom roll, they fail. My opponent spends 1 CP to re-roll it, they pass. Orange Devastator squad needs a 6 to fail, they pass. And the Ravenwing Black Knights are in a circle, so they don't need a morale test. Alright, so for points, I controlled 1, controlled 2. Break them Body of Soul, I haven't killed anything, so my grind them down is going to suck. Reality Rebels, I have 2 quarters and the center, so 3 more points. Thank you, Tree. Despoilers of Reality, 12 points, and 2 Warpstone points from that, so that has gone really well for a strong early lead. Let's see what happens.
Alright, you guys, so for movement, my blue tactical squad basically kind of lined the wall here, so he'll have a hard time. He won't be able to go through the wall to charge me. He'll have to actually go around it, which hopefully will do something, I guess. I don't know. And then my Ravenwing Black Knights actually retreated from combat using the hit and run stratagem, so they'll still be able to shoot as well, but they just won't be able to do anything else. And my Green Landspeeder actually just stayed, as did my Orange Squad. They stayed in combat. My Desolation Marines also stayed still, because they, I believe, can see this Great Unclean One, so we'll see if we can just blow his face off the planet. Then my Infiltrators actually pulled out of combat against his Plague Drones. They only moved like 2 inches, but anyway. And my red land speeder popped onto the objective, basically just kind of fire support, and Lazarus moved to face the Plague Drones, while my Brutalis Dreadnought moved in to hit his other Great Unclean One. Plague Bearers have 2 wounds each, so they kind of ruin his sweep attack, and he doesn't have enough attacks with his heavy one to really kind of clear the squad, so I figured might as well see what he can really do and send him against the Great Unclean One, and we'll see what happens. Might be a bad idea, but we'll see. And then my Warp Strikes, is it Warp Strike? Teleport Strike, came in, and originally I was actually going to have them come support around the Brutalis Dreadnought, or maybe around the Black Knights, but what I ended up doing is going in his back corner, threatening his, it's really one of his forward objectives, but it'll have to make him choose what to do with his Great Unclean One and his Beasts of Nurgles and stuff, and if they make the charge, I'll probably take this objective from him within this next turn, or this turn, if I make the charge. And so that was the Deathwing Apothecary, that was the Strike Master, and that was the Deathwing Knights. And so we'll see if that was the right choice or not. Alright, you guys, so for shooting, I started with my Apothecary into his Nurglings. Oh. And with his Stormbolter, he shot 4 shots, they all missed. So absolutely nothing. Then my Black Knights shot at his Great Unclean One, doing nothing. Or, no, I think they did 1 damage.
And
maybe.
No, they did 1 wound and I saved it.
That's right, okay. And then my Green Landspeeder Vengeance shot at his Plague Bearers, the Yellow Squad, and I think he did nothing as well.
Yep.
Then my Tacticals, they actually shot at the very end because I forgot about them, but I'll just throw them in here now because I'm pretty sure we didn't catch on camera. They also shot at them, and they actually did 2 damage with their bolters.
Which finished off 1.
Killed 1. Yeah, killed 1, did a wound to another. Then my Desolation Marines shot at his Great Unclean One, and so like 5 went through, but he saved 4 out of the 5, or 3 out of the 4, whatever it was. And I ended up doing 5 damage, but he had a damage reduction, so he took 4 damage on his Great Unclean One. And then their Castellan launchers, they shot at the orange squad of Plague Bearers towards the bottom, and they did nothing. Then my red Ravenwing land speeder shot at the orange squad as well, also doing nothing. And then the Brutalis dreadnought shot at them as well, also doing nothing. And that was a rather sad shooting phase. Alright, you guys, so the charge phase was a giant pile of crap. So my Deathwing Strike Master, top left, charged, rolled double 1s. Then I charged with my Deathwing Knights, rolled double 2s. I used Command Point to re-roll it, and they got a 5. So they went up by 1. So that was just a whole bust. I almost charged the Apothecary by himself, but he doesn't actually have combat weapons, so I decided against it, for the better. And then I charged Lazarus, and Lazarus needed a 1 or a 2, and he rolled double 6s. Which was super annoying, so he got in. And then my Brutalis Dreadnought needed a 5, and I rolled a 4. I had already spent my command point, so he's just chilling in the middle of nowhere. And that was my charge phase, and probably the game. Alright, you guys, so I started with Lazarus, obviously, because he was the only successful charge. I think 3 went through, and he failed all 3 of those saves. So I killed 1 drone and did 2 damage on the other. Then he swung with his purple plague bringers against my Devastator squad, killing 3, leaving the sergeant intact, in which he swung back and he actually did a single damage to the plague drones, bringing 1 to a single wound left. And then he swung back with his blue plague drone, or plague bringer, I guess is the champ that's left, and he did nothing. So that was the fight phase, you guys. Alright, you guys, so for points, I had Control 1, Control 2. I didn't kill any units, so Break from Body and Soul, didn't get anything for. Stubborn Defiance, I have 2 points now, because my whoever they are, the people, the sneaky ones, are still on it, so I got 2 points because it's the second turn. I got 2 points for Raise the Banners High in my phase, and then I got 2 points for Engage on all fronts because my knights are now in his back corner. So kind of a okay turn for points. They don't have any like high point things early on, so it'll be a slow climb for them. So as far as it goes, it's not bad. It's not great either, but anyway, so yeah, so not bad on points, but I think with all the failed charges, this game might essentially be done. I should also mention in the morale phase, my Devastator Sergeant ran for his life.
Which gave me Break Them Body and Soul and Grind Them Down.
Yep. So that happened.
Alright, so for the command phase, there was nothing. The trees couldn't do anything. For my was it Warp Storm points, I rolled 5, so that was very good. Then apart from that, I just did some maneuvering. So overall, the pink squad moved around the tree to get further distance from his Deathwing Knights to make it unlikely he'll get him. I still have a bunch of guys on the point, so I still have a good OPSEC, so I'll have strength there. Since all the deep strikes are in, the red Nurgling orange Nurgling started running up north to maybe be irritating. Red Unclean One, green one moved up to deal with the Brutalis. The orange Plague Bearers moved 3 inches because getting into dense cover and stuff to engage with infiltrators. The Beasts of Nurgle moved in to counter the Brutalis. Towards the top right, it took me a while to really figure out overall what was the best move for the game, and in the end I decided that it would be best to clear the top right and get more demons on there. So Great Unclean One moved forward to go sort of halfway between his Land Speeder and his Ravenwing. Beasts of Nurgle moved in to pinch the Space Marines, and my Yellow Plague Bearer squad going in to pinch with the Space Marines there. My purple squad of plague drones moved in to deal with the Desolation Marines. They moved onto the point, and since the Desolation Marines are not troops, I took it from him. And yeah, and that was the movement phase. Alright, so for the psychic phase, first the Warlord. He casts Nurgle's Rod, which is a 6-inch AoE spell, and it goes off, it hits the blue squad and the Ravenwing Landspeeder. Basically, I roll 2d6. If it's higher than their toughness, it's a d3 mortal wounds. If it's twice as high as their toughness, then it's d6 mortal wounds. I rolled double ones on the Space Marines, so they took no mortal wounds. Then the Landspeeder is toughness 6. I rolled a 12, so it took a d6. I rolled a 3, so 3 mortal wounds. Then I smited the Space Marine squad, went off, did 1 mortal wound. No, that was terrible. Then, at the bottom, the green guy gave a buff to the orange Plague Bearers, which was Virulent Blessing, which increases the damage of their swords by 1, so they're now all damage 2. And then he did Shriveling Pox on the Infiltrators, which reduces their toughness by 1. So now effectively they're toughness 3 till my next psychic phase. And that was the psychic phase. Alright, so for the shooting phase, I spent 2 Warp Storm points to do Wave of Sickness, which is a Nurgle ability. Basically, every enemy unit that's within 12 inches of a Nurgle Demon unit, on a 6, they take d3 mortal wounds. I rolled only 1 6 and on his entire army. And it was his green Ravenwing Landspeeder Vengeance on the top right. And it took 3 mortal wounds, and that was it. That was not worth 2 Warp Storm points. Then shooting. So, purple squad of Plague Drone. Oh shoot, I forgot to do them. Well, anyway. So then the green unclean one fired at the Brutalist Dreadnought with his relic weapon Effluvior and his Putrid Vomit. He brought it down to 6 wounds. Then up top, the great unclean one up top shot at the Ravenwing Bikers, and with his Plague Flail and his Putrid Vomit, he wiped the squad. And that was the shooting phase. Alright, so for charges, first the great unclean one, my Warlord up top, charges the Landspeeder, makes it in. I could spend a CP to try to destroy it outright right now, but like, nah. Then the Beasts of Nurgle, red, charges blue Space Marines. They make it in on a 6. Then the yellow Plague Bearers charge him. There's small little physical gaps in the wall, so I walk them through that. They make it in. Not that many are actually going to get to swing, though, but that's fine. Then, oh my god, I forgot another charge. The purple squad is going to charge his Desolation Marines. You'll see what happens at the end. The green Great Unclean one charges Brutalist Dreadnought, makes it in. Beast of Nurgle charge in, makes it in. My orange Plague Bearers charges Infiltrators. They fail. They needed a 5 because of difficult terrain. I spent a CP to reroll it, and they made it in heartily. And that was the charge phase. Alright, so for the fight phase. First, my red Great Unclean one swung on the vehicle with his 12 attacks, the sweep, which is damage 2 because of relic, and completely destroyed it. Then, at the bottom... No, wait. First I started with the Great Unclean one at the bottom. He used his 6 attacks, his strong attacks, which are a d6 damage each, and he destroyed the Brutalist Dreadnought. The Beast of Nurgle then consolidated, piled in towards the enemy. Great Unclean one consolidated towards there as well. My Great Unclean one up top smashed the Landspeeder. Then my red Beast of Nurgle up top killed 5 of the Space Marines. Then the yellow Plague Bearer swung and did 1 wound to them. Then after that, my orange Plague Bearers with their damage 2 swords killed 2 of the Infiltrators. It would have been 3, but he gets to ignore it, and I forgot that I reduced their toughness by 1, so I would have had more wounds, so I probably would have wiped out the squad. But I couldn't remember what I rolled. Then my purple, or my pinkish Plague Drones swung on his Desolation Marines in the back, killed 1 of them. And then on my Plague Ringer, brought it down to 1 wound. He did 2 damage to it. He is not...
So 1 wound went through.
Yeah, 1 wound went through, which was 2 damage, bringing him down to 1. My opponent, Infiltrator Sergeant, swung on my Plague Bearers. Nothing happened there, and he swung on my Plague Drones. He ended up doing 3 wounds to it. And, yeah, and before my opponent could roll the final dice, the power cut out, saving him. And
meaning that you forfeited by default.
No.
Archangel victory.
No. And then we decided to call it there. Alright, so we decided to call the game there because at that point, Nurgle only lost 4 Plague Bears and 2 Plague Drones and just had the complete sweep of the field unopposed, practically. And then if this game would stop freezing, thank you. Alright, so MVP, LVP. For Nurgle, LVP. So in this game, everything went incredibly well. So finding an LVP is actually a bit difficult. So in order to find a way to make it an LVP, I'm going with the Plague Bears, more specifically the Yellow Squad. They're the only ones who took any casualties, and when they finally got a chance to fight, they did 1 wound. So they were the least performing squad, the Yellow Plague Bearers. MVP, kind of a tough call, because we have the Feculent Narmos, who didn't really hold objectives, but easily held the... they basically were scoring units for my, not the spoilers of reality, the ones where I hold table quarters. These guys were just sitting, chilling, and getting me points. The one in the middle was getting me 1 point per turn, just for doing nothing, but being a nuisance. And then we have my great and clean one, the Warlord, with his damage reduction and his weapons and stuff, where he slaughtered a giant chunk of Ravenwing Knights. Slaughtered so much. Lord knows what would have happened if he got into a fight with something stronger or better, but he slaughtered a good contingent of my enemy, and he pushed them back. So he was very powerful, very important. Now, in the end, who is the most important? The way the game went, it was pretty one-sided, so there was no real dependency on him. So I'm going to have to go with the Feculent Narmos, who held the center and on their own gained 3 victory points. That's pretty much it. These guys were just earning me points for doing nothing. And that's my MVP and LVP. So what about you?
Well, LVP is pretty easy, I think, for me. I always forget, so I know Dark Angels are like a plasma army, even though they only have 1 stratagem for it, but it's like their lore, you see it across their units. Argus, do you mind? Thank you. Sorry guys, my dog was drinking water like nobody's business. So they have some really cool units with plasma, but basically, I forget how much I hate plasma weapons, because they have really high AP, which can be useful, but they have low damage. And so against demons, their save is their save, so AP doesn't matter. And then they just have low damage. It's like, well, why? What good are they? But in general, I hate plasma. So the Devastators with all plasma guns, no good. And then the Ravenwing Landspeeder Vengeance with a single plasma storm battery thing, no good. So I would say it's probably the Landspeeder Vengeance for me is my LVP. My whole army did almost nothing, so, but they did the least of the nothing, I think. And so yes, that's what I would say for LVP. MVP, honestly, no one really did anything. So I think technically Lazarus did the most damage. In the 2 turns he was just swinging on people, but even still that was like 6 damage, so it's pretty miserable. However, as far as damage potential goes, sure, you could say the Deathwing Knights, but they are really slow, so I'm starting to see some of their limitations. But these Black Knights are actually really cool because if you ran maybe like not Raven Guard, who are they? Raven Wing character with them that could re-roll hit rolls. You use their overcharge, and then you use a stratagem for an additional damage, like they're running around with a bunch of like damage 3, AP 3, strength 8 shots. And so their damage potential is actually really, really cool. And then there's a stratagem where they can fall back in the fight phase, so basically they can swing and then run away before the enemy swings back. Again, another stratagem. But so I actually really like their potential, like what they could do. Not that they did any of it, they basically just took it to the face as soon as anything showed up, and then they did nothing back. So I guess that's an MVP for me.
so that's his MVP. Alright, so final thoughts on the armies in the game. Well, Nurgle is my actual IRL army. I have almost all these models. I'm just missing one more set of the Nurglings, and I actually have to pick up the trees. I actually have built and painted 3 of these, but I sold them afterwards. I want them back. As army goes, because they're super slow, the Feculent Gnawer mods are very helpful for getting in good deep strikes, but you can use the Warp Storm points and the Plague Drones to subtract everyone's leadership by 1, and effectively you're more than likely going to have a 6-inch deep strike all throughout the board. And so Feculent Gnawer mods are useful as a meat shield distraction. Plague Drones are good for strategically hitting enemies because this army is very slow. And so basically, this is a counter-punch army. You set up a defensive line, which worked pretty well in this case. As far as the game goes, well, actually not. How was your attempt with the Dark Angels, this army? Just choosing everything.
Yeah, I don't know. They have so many unique units. And then they have, essentially, it's 3 armies in the book. They have just their actual Space Marines. And then they have the Raven Wing, and then they have the Death Wing. And so it's an interesting dynamic. I can see why people will do either just Death Wing or just Raven Wing. But I don't know. I don't like that as much. I mean, it could be fun every now and then, but so that kind of made it a little weird, trying to decide what to take. But then also because it's like, oh, well, lore-wise, and then they have a couple of stratagems for plasma guns. I was like, well, let me lean on the plasma, and I forgot how much I hate plasma. And so I don't think I made some of the best choices. But I did like they have a lot of pretty cool rules for them. Yeah, so I mean I did like them. I think making the list was kind of fun. Obviously this game went nowhere near my way, but still.
Yeah, well, as far as that goes, as far as how the game went, I mean, my strategies worked. It went exactly how I thought it would. I did my best to stop your Deathwing Knights from doing anything. Kind of reason why I don't take them is because you kind of...
The regular Terminators are that slow, so...
Yeah, but they normally deep strike in with guns, so they tend to do better. But yeah. Overall, I enjoyed it. This is actually my army, my personal army. It does pretty well. It can only play one way, counterpunch. Basically sit in an area, tank, and just hold out and just gather points, which is exactly how the Deathwing army meta plays. Yeah, but these guys play it cooler, more interesting. There's more to it, a little bit more. But well, I like the army. I hoped for more of a back and forth challenge for the game, but yeah, things happen. So, what about you? Your thoughts on the game and these?
Well, the game did not go my way from the very beginning, and then yeah, the plasma, it just doesn't have enough output, and so that wasn't super great. The Desolation Squad was interesting, but again, just demons having saves that just kind of do what they want. It didn't help them, so they did almost no damage. The whole game, charges, all my shooting was basically useless, and then I failed all of my saves. And so anyway, so the whole game it just did not go well for me at all. But I do like the ideas and the things that you can do with the Dark Angels. I think they're an army that takes a lot of time to put all those pieces together. Maybe not a lot of time, but more time than one game, because it's the first time I played them.
Yeah, I just spent 2 to 3 weeks painting up just 5 Deathwing Terminators. Freaking guys have so much iconography. Take forever, so yeah.
Yeah, and so I like the Knights. They're basically Thunderhammer dudes with no negatives, and they actually have a stratagem specifically for them to deal with bigger guys. So had they gotten into combat with you Great Unclean Ones, unless you saved most of them, which you probably would have anyway, they would have done a lot of damage there. I tried to do something a little different with them, but all their deep strike charges failed, but I almost never get deep strike charges anyway. So I always seem to forget that though. But so obviously delivery for them, it needs to be a little different. But I guess that's why people take like Death Wing armies or Raven Wing armies. You don't really see anyone actually play just Dark Angels, which bothers me. But I like having the mix, but I think I just needed a different mix. And yeah, so I like them. They have a lot of potential, but there's just so much going on. You gotta be careful with what you're actually picking.
Yeah, and a bit. Yeah, I would say I somewhat outplayed you on a lot of the movement and stuff. That's the one thing that I have that's unique. Deep striking in exactly where I need to, and then you failed a lot of very important charges. So this was a harsh game. But all right, so GG's. Don't know what we're playing next, but we're just playing the armies that we like the most, or we really wanted to try before 10th edition comes, and they completely change everything. And so
we'll start working our way through all the armies again.
Yep, and all right, we'll see you next week, and rip Voton. Bye.